What's up, y'all? It's Shuffle, and today's video is going to talk about stuns. We're going to talk about who can do them and what the best ones are and why they're good. So before we get started, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all the normal YouTube stuff. Check out the box below for Discord, Twitter, Twitch, and Patreon, where there's a bunch of other awesome stuff for you to partake in as well. As always, I try not to bury the lead in my videos, and stuns are great. There is no reason not to use them. They're actually kind of broken in just about every applicable circumstance. Even against enemies that have multiple actions, that means that the stun resist buff that enemies get once they come out of a stun falls off sooner. I guess that's something else I should talk about real quick too, is that once you stun an enemy and they recover from said stun, they get a little buff over their HP bar. That gives them an extra 50% stun resist just for that turn, and then if you're able to stun them again through that, it goes up by another 50. This is to prevent you from chain stunning enemies into oblivion and them not being able to do anything. The reason stuns are so good is because Darkest Dungeon is a game focused on action economy. You are trying to get more actions than your opponent because when you're able to do that consistently, that means you win. And there are a lot of fights in the game that focus on either disrupting your team by moving people or kidnapping them with certain mechanics. Just little things like that really diminish your action economy, so that's the way that those enemies beat you. And there are even a couple bosses that have access to stuns themselves, and those stuns can be very, very dangerous because they do a bunch of damage, and then you're stunned and you can't heal yourself. One of the very cool things about stuns is the fact that they're so helpful on action economy, and they generate some really good tempo. Tempo is a term that refers to momentum. That's pretty much what it is. It's interchangeable, so don't get too hung up on the little details like that. But one of the things I hear constantly, or not that much anymore, but that I heard a lot in the past from people was that they would say, why do I stun enemies? I'm just trading my turn for theirs. And I could see why you would think that, but that's actually not entirely true. No stun in the game just stuns and does literally nothing else. Every single stun, even the ones that don't do damage, do some kind of other extra effect. For instance, Blinding Gas is able to stun 2 enemies, and then Flashbang is able to stun an enemy and move them at the same time. So all stuns do something else on top of it, so you're never just trading your turn for the enemies. Most of the time they do a little bit of damage, which helps out quite a bit. And as I just said, if they're not doing damage, then they're doing something else that's really helpful, like disrupting the enemy. At the same time though, even if stuns were just trading one for one, a lot of the enemy turns are way more dangerous than what you're doing, so it's better to stun them anyway. The example I always point back to is with Vestal, because she has some really strong, consistent healing output, but the enemy does more damage than her healing can recover most of the time. So instead of letting a Pelagic Grouper hit you for 15, why don't you stun them instead, because otherwise if you went to heal, you'd only heal for 10. That's just an example, but that's the kind of logic that goes into stuns. When people say they need Vestal and Jester to beat everything in the game, there are a lot of times where you can just run a heavy stun team and prevent damage, and it's better than recovering damage. I'm going to cut this point off there because otherwise I'm going to start going on about action economy, and I already made a video on that. Not counting Musketeer, out of the 17 heroes in the game, 10 of them have access to a stun. That's over half the cast. So stuns are more common than you think. So let's go through the class list and see who can stun and how good those stuns are. First up is Abomination. He has Manacles, and Manacles is an okay stun. It's attached to a character that has 9 base speed at max level, which is really good, and he has some pretty solid on-hit damage. So being able to hit something with Manacles for like 5 to 10-ish, I think is the usual range, and have a decent okay stun chance is pretty nice, especially because it can hit rank 3, or 2, or 1, and you can also use it from rank 3, which is the back of your party. The main issue with Manacles is that it has a very low base stun chance, and that's because it's balanced around Abomination's stun trinkets like Padlock of Transference and Broken Key. If you do not have access to one of these trinkets, stunning with Abomination is going to feel kinda bad. Bounty Hunter, on the other hand, is a character with 2 stuns instead of just 1, and his stuns are pretty freaking good. He has Uppercut, which is a frontline stun that shoves the frontliner to the back. It is a specific effect, for lack of a better word. It's not like Flashbang that has a random position it can move them to, because that's a shuffle effect. Uppercut is something that will always push them back to if it sticks, and that can be very good. So we'll talk about Uppercut a bit later. I promise there's a reason for it, but we're going to talk about Flashbang. Flashbang is a pretty cool stun because it has an extra 10% over the average stun chance, and it has 10% more than Uppercut. It also comes with the ability to shuffle the target that it hits. This can be really helpful because sometimes you can knock a rank 2 enemy back to rank 4, which is what Uppercut normally does. You just get a higher chance to stun. Or you can pull a rank 4 enemy up to the front, or sometimes rank 3 up to the front, where they are severely disadvantaged because they're up in the front now and they can't use some of their good moves. Sadly, Bounty Hunter, who has 2 pretty good stuns, does not get access to any baseline stun trinkets. That's kind of weird, and I feel like that's an oversight from Red Hook. Crusader has one of my favorite stuns. It's not necessarily the best stun, but he has Stunning Blow. This is a move that only has a 50% damage penalty on Crusader, who hits pretty hard at 10 to 19 at max level. So you can hit something with Stunning Blow for a good 5 to 10 damage without any other boosts, and then you have a good stun chance on top of it. This helps Crusader keep the frontline enemies locked down, who usually do the most damage to your party. Crusader also gets access to a couple class stun trinkets. He gets Paralyzer's Crest, which is basically 20% stun chance with no downside. This thing is absolutely nuts. And then you have Non-Euclidean Hilt, which is a very expensive Color of Madness trinket with that same bonus 20% stun chance. But honestly, as good as the Non-Euclidean Hilt is, it is not realistic to get in most playthroughs. It's something like you either have to start farming for early, or you don't get it until you're way deep in a completed file because it's very expensive. Another stun that you actually never want to ever use if you can help it is from Flagellant. Flagellant is a character that if he hits 0 HP, he group heals your party, and then if he actually dies, he stuns the entire enemy team. It's not a super high chance, but you don't want to lose a hero just to get a full enemy team like stun. The only reason it's even remotely okay is because sometimes, I shouldn't even say sometimes, like losing a hero is very detrimental. The game has this concept of death spiral, so if you're able to lose a hero, it's nice that at least he stuns the entire team on his way out. Go figure, Flagellant also gets no class stun trinkets because that would honestly be kinda troll if he did get one. Hellion, another character with a stun but no stun trinkets. Hellion gets Barbaric Yop. This is a very powerful stun. You only get 3 uses of it per battle, and it also debuffs Hellion every time she uses it. This stuns both frontline enemies at the same time on the enemy team with a 10% higher than normal stun chance. Even if you have to hit one size 2 enemy or something like that with Yop, it's actually still pretty good, just because there are a lot of times you're going to find yourself in these positions where a lot of damage is going to come in from the front line of the enemy team, and you need to slow it down in some way, and Yop is an excellent panic button. I don't recommend building Hellion around Yop. It's nice to have, but like I said, it's more of a panic button than anything else, because Hellion is such an efficient damage dealer. You'd rather she be hitting everything that she can every single turn and trying to kill enemies, which is like permanently stunning them. Next up, we're going to talk about Houndmaster, who comes with Blackjack. That is a stun that he can use in ranks 1 and 2. So if you want to use Blackjack, you lose access to Cry Havoc, and if you're in rank 1, I believe Hound's Rush you also lose, besides some of the other stuff, and Lick Wounds. But anyway, you lose some stuff by getting Blackjack, but Blackjack is a very good stun in its own right. You get access to a trinket called Cudgel Weight, which is 25% bonus stun chance at the cost of 1 speed, which does kind of hurt. But Blackjack can hit from ranks 1 to 2 and into 3, so you can stun enemies like Cultist Witch or some of the squishier backline enemies that the enemy has with a pretty powerful stun. Just by the stun percentage, I believe Cudgel Weight turns Blackjack into the 2nd highest base stun chance, which is pretty crazy. Only Hands from the Abyss are better, and we're going to talk about Occultist here shortly. Just to cap off this section though, Blackjack alone is worth running Houndmaster up front. It is very, very good. For example, if you wanted to build some kind of stun utility Houndmaster, you could put him up front with Cudgel Weights and some kind of dodge trinket, because he has some pretty okay base dodge on his own. He can also raise it by using Guard Dog, which lets him guard another ally. So he doesn't have to do a lot of damage. He can just be up front stunning stuff and then guarding when needed and dodge tanking, which is a pretty cool build. Next is Man-at-Arms, who has a really good stun himself in the form of Rampart. This has a lot of similarities to Uppercut because they both stun something and move it back, but Rampart only moves them back 1 instead of back 2, but also when Man-at-Arms uses Rampart, he moves forward himself 1 space. So this is what I was saying before, where stuns aren't really like a huge tempo loss. You're not trading turns, because with Rampart, you're stunning the enemy, you're potentially moving them, and then you're moving Man-at-Arms as well, which can set up other things like dance teams or help people get back into position. A lot of versatility in this move. He also gets a couple really good stun trinkets. He gets the Rampart Shield, which go figure is for the move Rampart, but it gives him bonus move and stun chance on Rampart, and then also lowers his damage a little bit, which does kind of suck, but honestly the upsides to this are so worth it. The other trinket that Man-at-Arms gets for stunning is the old unit standard. This comes from Crimson Court. The bonus for stun chance is not as high as Rampart Shield, but it gives you some other cool things like death blow resist and the ability to get more consistent bellows by giving you debuff chance. It's a pretty cool item because where Rampart Shield just locks you into using Rampart, Old Unit Standard gives you a couple of different skills that you can make use of, and it gives them some other added defensive value with the Deathbolt resist. You could run one of these and have a very strong Rampart, or run both and try and double stun stuff. When we talk about stunning and occultist, we have to understand that we're talking about a very special character with a special move. Hands from the Abyss is such a disgustingly powerful stun, and it's not even just the percentages and the numbers and stuff like that. It's the fact that occultist gets access to not one, but two premium stun trinkets. Even then though, we can't sweep the numbers under the rug. This thing hits kinda hard on its own, and it has a huge crit modifier. So whenever you crit in Darkest Dungeon, the bonus effects of your attack are amplified by 20%, which sounds a bit confusing. So for instance, if your stun chance is 100%, and you you critical hit the enemy with it, the stun chance goes from 100 to 120. That's because you get the bonus 20%. So if you've ever wondered why things that crit you seem to stick better, like the bleeds and the stuns and stuff, that's the reason. I haven't had to make this point yet in the video because all the other stuns are pretty much fair and balanced, but Hands from the Abyss has such a ridiculously high crit rate, and then the trinkets you can give occultists also give more crits, that this stun can cap out at, I believe, 220% stun chance at champion if you crit, which is ridiculously high. This is what makes Occultist so powerful. He's a character that can not only double stun an enemy, which is stunning them not once but twice back to back, even though they get the stun resist buff. He can triple stun, which is stunning them a third time, so they already have a bonus 100% stun resist on top of their normal stuff because you've already stunned them twice in a row. He can stun enemies a third time if their stun resist is low enough, especially if he crits. It is so strong stunning with this character, which is why every time you see me play Occultist, or I should say most of the time, I have him up front, and that's because Hands from the Abyss is such a strong ability. Someone as squishy as Occultist you may not want to run up front because you're worried about him dying, but his ability to just stun huge threats very easily with his trinkets means you can leave him up front and he's pretty safe because he can stun anything that's going to be a big threat to him. The two stun trinkets I keep alluding to for Occultist are Demon's Cauldron and Vial of Sand. Demon's Cauldron in particular is a very overstated and gross trinket. You get 30% stun chance on a stun that already has a ton of stun chance. You get debuff chance also, which helps your Weakening Curse and Vulnerability Hex. Those are pretty cool too. But the other things that are worth mentioning are the minus Virtue, the plus stress, which don't usually come into play that often unless you're playing a very high stress damage type of mission. And then there's the 3% crit on top of that. That 3% crit on top of Hands from the Abyss, like base crit chance of however much it is, like 13%, means that this thing is critting all the frickin' time. Vial of Sand is nuts because you're pretty much just doubling up on your stun chance. Then you have debuff chance as well, so we have two of the same things we just got from the other trinket. Then you have move chance if you want to use Damon's Pull, and then you have stun resist on top of it with no downside. So if you run these two trinkets together, your base stun chance at champion is 200%, plus your massive crit modifier, and that's how you get up to 220. That is freaking nuts. So between these two trinkets and Hands from the Abyss, you're able to easily double stun most enemies in the entire game. And then some of the lower stun resist ones, you can triple stun them like Chevaliers, and they can't do anything to you because they're just sitting there stunned for the entire fight. If you pair this up with Jester to help fix Occultist's pretty bad baseline accuracy, then you get more accuracy from Battle Ballad as well as more crits, which means you're critting even more. Up next is Plague Doctor, who is probably everyone's first exposure to stuns in this game because you get her as one of your first characters. Actually, I guess Stunning Blow would be the first, but that's neither here nor there. So Plague Doctor is really good because she has two different stuns. They kind of overlap a little bit in a way. You have Blinding Gas, which stuns both backline enemies at the same time. Sometimes I refer to this as a double stun because you're stunning two enemies, and then I refer to stunning an enemy multiple times as double stun as well. So make of that what you will, but you can consider this a stun cleave, like Yop, except for the backline. This move alone is why you put Plague Doctor on your team. Other characters have reach, other characters have damage over time, other characters can heal. You put Plague Doctor on your team if you need someone who is quick, who can stun both enemies in the back, specifically rank 4. The only other stun in the game that can stun rank 4 is Flashbang, and then also Disorienting Blast, but we're talking about the same character at this point. And I guess Flagellant too for that matter, but yeah, I digress. Blinding Gas is absurd as a button. It is one of the strongest stuns in the game. It's on a character that is fast enough to stun both backliners at the same time, and this is one of the easiest ways to mitigate damage and stress coming into your team without having to rely on someone like Jester, who is a reactive healer. Even though you only get 3 shots of this per battle, outside of Endless Harvest, 3 is enough for pretty much every fight in the game, even a lot of the boss battles that you take Plague Doctor to. Her other stun doesn't get used as much because it's only a single target, and it's like, why would you use a single target stun when you have a double target stun? And that is Disorienting Blast. This move is still pretty good. It's much like Flashbang, where it stuns the enemy and then moves them out of position, so you get the same high rolling nonsense of pulling a rank 4 and throwing it into rank 1. But the other added benefit of Disorienting Blast is that it has no usage limit like Blinding Gas does, but then also it clears corpses. This can be pretty helpful. There are a few times, depending on your team comps or the enemies you're facing, where it is worth getting rid of bodies, and this will help you do that. Plague Doctor gets access to stun from 3 of her trinkets. She gets Witch's Vial, which is just a slightly stronger Dazzling Charm. This thing is pretty nice to find and use early, but you're only using this thing until you find her best trinket, which is Blasphemous Vial. This trinket is ridiculously statted. It's been nerfed, so if you can even believe it, this thing used to be stronger, and it gives her everything she wants. It gives her bonus accuracy on her range attacks, which is very helpful for the evasive backliners. It gives her bonus stun chance at 20%, which is really good. And then she gets bonus blight on top of it, which helps her damage if she wants to go blight damage. Most people, the first time they look at this, they go, wow, that's 25% bonus stress though, that's really damaging. And it's honestly not as damaging as you would think, because Plague Doctor is a character who is fast enough to stun the enemy backline, where most of their stress comes from. So if you're able to go first and stun them, and then kill them with the rest of your party by turn 2, you're not going to be taking a lot of stress, so the plus 25% stress rarely comes into play, at least from the backline. This trinket specifically is one I wait to see on a boss before I go and kill one of my first bosses whenever I start a new file. It is so strong, and it turns Plague Doctor into a powerhouse goddess of a character. Her third way to get stunned from trinkets actually isn't that good. It's her Crimson Court set, so when you have both pieces of it, which are the Subject 40 notes and the Dissection Kit, you get bonus 15% stun chance along with a bunch of other stats on top of that. And the stats collectively are pretty nice, but the reason it's not that good is because backline enemies are evasive. Blasphemous Vial is good because it gives you accuracy on top of the other stuff that it's doing. Witch's Vial is good because you can get the same 15% bonus stun chance, and then slot in an accuracy trinket to help you hit backliners. You get no accuracy from the Crimson Court set, which means you either need accuracy quirks or Jester, or I guess Man-at-Arms. The nice part about Plague Doctor 2 is she can fit into a variety of teams. Stuns win everywhere in every zone. There are very few stun immune enemies in the game, and it doesn't matter if they're resistant to Blight or if they're resistant to Bleed. You can just stun them, even in Crimson Court with Dazzling Mirror, for instance. So Plague Doctor can find her way to a variety of teams. As long as you can afford a slot in the back of your party for her, she's gonna do fine. She's gonna show up with her stuns and Battlefield Medicine and lock everything down, keep it all stunned and not hurting you, and then cure dots and stuff if you actually need that. Topping off this video, as usual, is Vestal. Vestal only gets 2 stun-related trinkets out of her entire kit. She gets Sacred Scroll, which is a trinket I very much dislike specifically because of the minus stun chance. I've talked about this thing a few times, especially in a video where I talk about traps, so I usually avoid Sacred Scroll, so I don't think I need to go further on that. It's not a good stun trinket, for obvious reasons. Vestal, however, does get a positive stun bonus from her Crimson Court set. The set is interesting because the Atonement Beads are specifically for Mace Bash Vestal, which is not that good. Like, you can make it work for sure, but it's not her ideal playstyle. And then you get the bonus healing from Salacious Diary, and then you get the stun chance on top of it, so it's this kind of mishmash of stats that are all over the place, again with no accuracy, much like Plague Doctor's set, where it tries to give you a bit of everything. So I don't really like the set the way it's statted, but the good part of the set is once you start thinking about it as having 25% bonus healing from the diary, and then 35% stun chance from the trinket set, it doesn't really matter the other stuff that you're trading off instead. So if you were going to run Vestal with something like Chirurgeon's Charm or one of her healing trinkets and then like a Dazzling Charm, why not run the Crimson Court set together? And you can just assume that the Atonement Beads, instead of being minus Virtue and plus melee damage and stuff, is just plus 35% stun chance. Would you run Vestal with plus 25% healing and plus 35% stun chance? I would. I think that's really good. So if you do find the entire set in one of your games, give it a try. It's actually pretty good together. Vestal gets one stun ability, and that is Dazzling Light. This is a pretty mediocre stun in the grand scheme of things. The crit modifier is okay, the accuracy is pretty average, the damage penalty is about what you'd expect, and then the stun chance is pretty average as well. For what it's worth, it does add to your torch meter every time you use it, which can be helpful because it may save you a couple torches over the course of a dungeon. Vestal's stun is honestly not great. The advantages that it does have is that it can be used from rank 2, so if you want to run a rank 2 Vestal that uses Mace Bash, you get access to stun and group heal, which is a pretty good set of skills. That's an okay build to run. And when she's in back, then she can use Dazzling Light alongside Judgment and the 2 heals. This moveset is the usual preferred method of playing Vestal just because it's the easiest and most effective to play. This final section is going to talk about what I think are the best stuns in the game. So no surprise that Blinding Gas is probably one of the 3 best stuns in the entire game. It is a double stun that hits the backline and prevents a lot of stress from hitting your party, and also shuts down any other threats that might be in the back. My second choice is Hands from the Abyss, which is probably no surprise to anyone who has seen this video or watched me play at all because I always run it. And I think it needs to be included in the discussion for the best stun in the game just because it's so powerful on a character that gets a bunch of stun chance. Because of the reasoning for Hands from the Abyss, you could actually consider Blackjack as probably number 3, but I'm going to move away from something as similar as Hands from the Abyss, and I'm going to instead suggest Uppercut. The reason I like Uppercut so much is that it pulls double duty as a stun move. It can hit something in the front line and knock it to rank 4, which can remove most frontline enemies for at least 2 turns, sometimes 3. The reason for this is because they go into rank 4, and then they're stunned, and then they recover from stun, and then they have to use a movement skill to get back up front, which is some pretty lengthy crowd control. And the best part is, when the enemy finally gets back up to the front, the stun resist buff has worn off, and then you can uppercut them again. There are a lot of contenders for the top 3 stuns in the game, but these are my picks, and I hope that my reasoning is at least something that makes sense. Alright, well, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you're thinking down below in the comments. Give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Let me know if I missed anything or if you have some thoughts that I didn't catch on to. And then, of course, like I always say, check out the description box for Discord, Twitter, Twitch, and Patreon. Twitch has been pretty fun the last couple weeks. We've had a lot of extra new people showing up, which is awesome. And we've all been having a good time. Next up for videos, I actually have some on the docket for y'all. I'm going to do the stalling guide. I have to sit down and actually write it out. I'm going to hope to record that maybe Thursday or Wednesday night. We'll see. And the other video I plan on making is an inventory management guide. This is something I've gotten a few questions about. They're like, Shuff, you've done the money guide, you've done the whatever guide, the provision guide. We need to know how to manage our inventory while we're doing missions. So what I'm going to do is probably just run a mission, kind of like Team of the Week. I'm going to sit there and really hyper-focus on how I'm managing the inventory to see if that gives everyone enough tips. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.